Here we are between two sprints. I'm your host, Matt Thomas, with my fearless co-host, Adam Rolfe, aka Speed Farm, and our guest of honor today, Diwesh Poudyal, like Odell Beckham. Here we are between two sprints, have to show it off visually. And I'm super excited to chat with Diwesh to hear about his experience with his 1080 Sprint 2 at Champion PT and Performance. He's the director of fitness there, coming up on a decade. Kind of crazy to think about that. But I've really enjoyed working with you and your staff. Look forward to continuing to do so in the future. But tell everyone how you're doing today and anything pertinent about your background that I didn't get to, and then we will hop into it.
I'm doing good today, man. I mean, heck, I got to coach some of my favorite group of guys. Got to use the 1080 while doing it. Got my own workout in, which sometimes after you're doing it for a while and you got staff to manage and stuff, sometimes falls to the wayside. So getting my own training in is actually kind of important. So all in all, yeah, good day. Yeah.
Heck yeah. So I don't know how many months or if we've hit the year mark yet that y'all have had your unit, but I guess you've probably been the one who's taken the unit kind of under your wing or kind of manned that project the most. So take us through that first 3 months, 6 months. You probably knew what a 1080 was for the most part as an outsider, and then you finally kind of got your hands on it. So kind of take us through again that kind of first 3 months, 6 months, light bulbs, anecdotes, et cetera, and then we'll go from there with this kind of PT performance kind of blend that you guys have over there.
Yeah, for sure. So I think first when we got it was like excited kid, like we knew all the capabilities of it. We had all these thoughts and ideas, and then bang, when it comes to execution, you start using it as just a resisted sprinting device like everything else, and you're like, okay, hang on, this thing can do way more. So I would say the past was a fancy just resisted sprinting device, which was not using it to its full capacity. And then as we got a little bit better, I think we started to systemize a couple things. We started to figure out exactly, how to manipulate the eccentric and concentric loads, how to manipulate the eccentric and concentric velocities. And then that opened up some more windows and doors. So we started to use it a little bit more for repetitions of exercises, isolated strength work, incorporating into some of our power exercises like lateral bounds and hide-ins and broad jumps and things of that nature. And then more recently, I guess a soft launch, at least on Champion, is that we moved after almost a decade in a building, moved into a better facility that has longer sprinting lanes, a little bit more space to just do more multi-directional change direction type stuff. So now we've really been using it, I think, closer to its full capacity, where we're doing a lot more assisted sprinting, short and longer distances. Like I work with my guys today, my MLB guys, on some 20-yard lateral start sprints with the assist, trying to really hit some peak velocities there. And then we've really started to hone in on kind of using it for arm care for our professional baseball players also. So we like to periodize our arm care just like every other muscle group. I think this is one of the things that's a little bit lost in the baseball world. I think all the fancy, cool looking exercises are overtaking just simple progressive overload, and then manipulating some of our other factors like time and attention, manipulating eccentric and concentric loads, things like that. So we've really been trying to make a combination of really fast and freakishly athletic athletes and some really robust shoulders and knees between our shoulder programs and our ACL programs and stuff. That's kind of where I would leave it for the general end of things right now.
That was not general, Matt. That was a lot.
That was awesome.
That was
awesome.
A progression, even since the last time I saw you in person there, of what you're doing. So that's really cool. And so one of the things I want to double click on was like, what measurables are you looking at with your baseball guys? Like, because you talked a lot about like just treatment and like what you're doing for training, but break it down for the objectives piece. What are you guys doing with the 1080?
Yeah. So like in our arm care, we're looking at isokinetic peak force going into concentric external rotation, whether it's at 0 degrees of abduction or at 90 degrees of abduction. So that's one of the things that we look at in like our heavy strength building phase. We're starting to do a little bit more of our eccentric overload, especially in like the decelerated positions in the arm. So think kind of like towards ball release when the arm's outstretched in front of you. You have all that traction force at a bunch of RPMs where your arm's basically being yanked off the shoulder joint. So getting athletes really strong and robust there in that distraction position for the shoulder. So we'll look at eccentric force production there, and just the control in that. So we'll just set it to reps and, have it be like super, super light on the concentrics. We don't want to focus on the concentric. We'll like really jack up to like 150, 175, 200% eccentric overload, and really, push some of our guys. Now, as I say this, I do want to be careful that you just can't go ahead and give this to everybody. So this is our big league baseball players that have gone through our basic phases of arm care, where they're really building general concentric and eccentric strength. They're building really good dynamic stability of the shoulder. So when they're, a month out from heading off to spring training, we can start getting a little bit more specific in what they need, or being a little bit more on the, the specific periodization of arm care and shoulder care.
So with this idea of we're just doing good PT, just progressed over time and being more systematic than simply just going from the pink to the baby blue dumbbell, I describe, the sprint and the motorized resistance of, it is just hardware. It's a motor, a line, and it's data, but it has to support kind of what you're doing. So as you said, like even in that one building was a decade, and you guys have had this for like a year-ish. Yeah. So you guys know how to do, good PT and good prehab and things like that. What light bulbs or maybe tweaks or modifications, or how has it kind of progressed your philosophy of kind of doing this preventative rehab PT type stuff? Is it like, wow, like we're more objective based than timeline, or I'm 100% all in on I need intensity, because now I can track that. So like any kind of light bulbs, anecdotes, modifications, or even if it just doubles down on something you kind of already believed, or how has it kind of worked backwards to kind of your philosophy?
Yeah, I think the working backwards is probably the big one for me. And that's just kind of that's how I tend to think. I don't really like going from like one step to the next progression kind of thing. I'd rather kind of start with the big picture in mind, reverse engineer that, work my way back to what we need to accomplish. So I've really kind of taken the reverse engineering mindset, where I'm trying to figure out exactly what problem I'm trying to solve, and then what are my tools that are needed to solve that problem. And it just happens to be that the awesome abilities of being able to change eccentric concentric load, eccentric concentric velocities of the 1080 fits in really nicely into a lot of those, long-term reverse engineering plans, right? Whether it's some of our shoulder stuff for our baseball guys, or if it's our rehab athletes coming back from an ACL tear. And I got to really look at, all right, what do they need to be ready for at month 8? But then what can I really start to develop at month 4 to prep for month 8? So I think it's been a lot more of using some of the abilities of the 1080 as well as the measurables that it gives me, combining it with the force plate data that I can use, combine it with the basic principles of gaining strength, gaining comfort, building confidence, and then kind of putting it all together. I don't know that there's one like, boom, I had this light bulb, and then now I'm all of a sudden a way better strength coach,
But next topic I'd be interested in diving into, speaking about your MLB guys and just working with a bunch of people anyways, kind of in the private sector. What kind of light bulbs or anecdotes have some of your athletes gotten? Maybe even some with a little bit higher of a training age of like having never done isokinetics, or just being able to load super, super precisely. Like, what is that? How many 1080 fans of athletes do we have kind of at Champion now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'll give you a couple from as recent as yesterday and today. So yesterday I did some load velocity profiling to just get very, very exact as far as some of the velocity decrement stuff that I wanted to do. So I wanted to expose one of my better MLB athletes to, a little bit more peak power sprinting. And before we did the LVP, we were kind of using charts and we had a decent idea. But then I was like, no, you know what? Like we're going to spend a little bit of time, even though it is going to be fatiguing. So we went ahead and did it. And, I told him like, all right, your 50% velocity decrement is 18.4. And he was like, 0.4. It's like, yeah, like this is exact. Like this is exactly what your body is going to need to be able to train at that exact thing that I want you to accomplish, or that physiological adaptation that I want your body to make. And it was just this like immediate like reaction from the face. That's like, oh, like we're doing it like that. So that's an example. And then another one was I was actually messing around with some multidirectional change direction and retreating drills. So one of my big leaguers, outfielder, and just doing a little bit more multidirectional stuff where I'm having them do a resisted back pedal with a reactionary hip swivel. So imagine like athletes sprinting backwards. I'm pointing left, right. They're doing a hip swivel in the direction that they need to get to, i.e. tracking a fly ball, something like that. And then another reactionary clap or a go call, they're doing a full turnaround and sprinting the other direction. And he immediately walked back after rep number 2. Rep number 1, he was like, all right, like I think I need to get a little bit of the hang of this. Rep 2, obviously, as good athletes do, they pick it up right away, right? Which is not annoying, but that's why they're really good. Picked it up right away on rep number 2 and was like, this is sick. Right. So I would say those are 2 that immediately come to mind amongst countless others that I definitely encounter on a weekly basis.
That's awesome. No, that's awesome. One of the things I wanted to also dig into, you said at the beginning, was you're starting to do more assisted sprinting now that you have more space in your environment. And maybe I put words in your mouth. Maybe you're just doing assisted running, maybe not going 105% of their top velocity in your facility, but maybe there's not a lot of Major League Baseball guys getting that stimulus. We're starting to see more and more of it, but I'd love to know kind of how you're thinking about that. What distances are you going? Yeah. Some instructions, like what's your experience so far, and what are you trying to get out of it?
Yeah. Let me add one more to it, because I think it'll kind of paint a better picture. So the way that I've been kind of thinking about the assisted stuff is using the assisted sprinting to essentially help create a little bit more decelerated forces that are required to hit the brakes or change direction. So that'll be like my shorter 5 yards or 10-yard sprints, but then from there redirecting that force by cutting back in the opposite direction or making an angled cut. But I would still classify that as like my assisted sprinting plus decel or something like that. So we'll go shorter distances like that to work on braking forces. And then to really try to expose them to the highest velocity that we at least can in the building while being on ground, right? Like I know we have our Woodway treadmill that allows us to see 20, 21 miles per hour, but it's not really real earth. And I would rather put them on real earth as they're a month away from camp. So for exposing them to really high velocities in our building, I'm having them do 20-yard accelerated sprints. And we're seeing some pretty good stuff. Like I had a couple of guys in the mid to high 18 miles per hour range, as short as 20 yards from a lateral start. Like it's quite solid. Yeah.
Yeah. So sticking with the kind of lower half assisted theme, I'll bridge the gap to kind of our lower body RTP chat, and assisted sprinting and being able to load in the horizontal vector, because everything is very specific, right? So how has the ability to load in that vector, lower body wise, kind of plus the data, you can tease what we'll do an actual webinar about in a little bit, but the ability to create, again, dial down to the 0.1 kilos, right? To have a little bit more objectivity in the kind of RTP process. What have been some of those kind of, I will use a light bulb lightly, or your favorite kind of drills, I guess, with some of your like lower body ACL kind of RTP cases?
Yeah. Definitely like broad jump variations. I'm talking like broad jump singles or even like triples. I've lightly messed around with some like straight like track like triple jumps with some of my really good athletes, more advanced athletes. And then in the other plane, lateral bound and height and variations, those tend to be the ones that I really get into. I mean, if we're talking about close earth or running, like we use it for a lot of bounding. We do use it for a lot of faster ground contact stuff like dribbling, calf dribbles, ankle dribbles, knee dribbles. I do tend to save that for my more coordinated athletes, but dribbles are hard.
So my background as a PT, I've always had, and I know you have a similar philosophy as we've talked in the past, but maybe speak to a little bit more about the return to play process. So from beginning to when you get them, maybe 4 months after an ACL injury, and you're really working on improving athleticism, right? It's not just about, okay, is your knee okay? But we're giving you the confidence that that you could play, but you can play at maybe a higher level than you played before. And I'm interested how you're using the 1080 to help get that psychological barrier that so many people have coming back from an injury, such as an ACL reconstruction, to like prove it to that athlete. They prove to themselves that they're ready to go and they're ready to perform. Do you have any experience like you'd like to speak about that?
Yeah, I think even early on, like it's really as simple as getting them exposed to doing drills that just remotely look more athletic than what they've been doing in PT. So we actually, because we have a really good system where it's a facility of strength conditioning coaches and PTs that are under one umbrella, under one system, right? We're not siloed out where it's a different company running PT and a different company running strength conditioning. Like we have two owners that are the same. I direct the fitness side of things. It's all one system that we all get to talk about on a regular basis. So we get our athletes in at 3 months in the gym for ACL, which is pretty early in most places. And right away, we kind of start having the conversation of how do we get this athlete confident as far as we're no longer just rehabbing this knee and making sure that it just feels okay and good enough like a knee, like you're saying, Adam, but exposing them to somewhat athletic movements, whether that's hopping, skipping, jumping, giving them a screen that gives them a readout, giving them something that's pulling forward. Like one of my favorite ones early on is like, and we'll start this for knees that aren't cranky. That's important to keep in mind. Not every 3-month ACL is the same. But for knees that aren't cranky, like I'll put them on the 1080. We'll go into assisted sprinting mode, have X amount of kilos pulling them forward, and they'll get into a walking lunge where they're simply just working on hitting the brakes every time they go down to the bottom of the lunge and push back up. Get into their next step, they hit the brakes, push back off, right? So just challenging them in slightly different ways that has some objectivity, like you're saying, that they can track over the course of time, and then we can track how that is going to feel subjectively later on in the next day. Stuff like that has been super powerful. And then when we get into jumping month 4 and month 5, and we start actually doing things like broad jumps in month 5, it's cool because they can look back and say, oh, like 1200 watts is good, right? For power. And we're like, yeah, you're good.
And I'm sure that the continuity as well of they've been on the machine, they know what 3 kilos feels like, they understand wearing the belt and taking it on and off and just like all the things about it's not some like new crazy tech that's like randomly inserted halfway through the rehab, So that idea of kind of early exposure is kind of light bulb for me as a not PT guy. But using the constraints to support kind of what you are trying to accomplish. Like I know some people they'll do more resisted stuff to keep the speed down. So it's like, can we do more athletic things? Just apply some load to make it quote a little bit like safer, let's say, or slower. Ipso facto, a little bit safer. So makes a bunch of sense to me. And we're coming up here on 20 minutes ish. So last question before I roll out the red carpet is what are you most excited about, curious about? You have a bunch of free time. I know, wink. I'm just kidding. But if you had like just your MLB guys and that was your only thing to do, or just like you were only in charge of the ACL kind of cohort, what are you most interested in diving into? And if time was of no scarcity,
Yeah. I would love to get into the force time velocity curves for a bunch of different types of movements. And I'm talking like multidirectional stuff. So like similar to the retreating drill that I was talking about earlier. I would love to start looking at the ability to brake, the ability to redirect, the ability to change directions, as well as now that we do have slightly longer runway for sprinting, start to look at inefficiencies and discrepancies side to side within the sprinting mechanics. I would assume that we're going to see a decent amount, even just thinking into some of our like vertical vector stuff. Like I take a healthy athlete on the force plate and, sometimes I'm seeing a healthy athlete with 20-25% discrepancy, right limb versus left limb. And there's nothing wrong with them, by the way. That's just the strategies that they've developed, and seeing if that's present in athletic movements like sprinting and cutting and stuff, seeing if there is ways for us to slowly start diminishing that discrepancy, or, maybe we learn along the way that like, no, you know what, these are highly adapted athletes. We actually leave them alone and let them compensate and just keep an eye on it, because that competition might be what's making them really good. Right. So these are questions that I often ask. So I would love to be able to dedicate some time to, see if I can investigate this a little bit further, looking at a little bit more of the graph data in the 1080.
Yeah, more the qualitative to the quantitative is kind
Yeah.
of how I describe it for sure. So thank you very much for your time, sir. I'll roll out the red, but I guess yellow for 1080. Carpet for you to shamelessly plug, emphasis shameless, what you got going on, where people can find you, maybe foreshadow our little webinar coming up, and
More.
if
Yeah.
they want to learn more about Diwesh.
Yeah. Man, I mean, I'm kind of lame when it comes to like the social media end of things. Like I'm going to try to do a little bit better job in 2026. My wife's actually going to help me with some
Social media
educational
manager.
content. Yeah, exactly. So that might be coming up, but I'm only active really on Instagram at Diwesh Poudyal. First name, last name, pretty simple. There's not many of me out there. That's really it. And then if you do follow the Champion PT and Performance Instagram page, I try to have one of my coaches, post a good bit of what we do. So if anyone wants just like insight into what a day-to-day looks like, or exercises and drills that we like, or some concepts that we might go over in somewhat like mid-form educational content, you can always follow that. But yeah, besides that, I'm working with these guys here on a webinar series for ACL return to play. So I'm excited about that. That might be a multi-part thing that ends up becoming a really good educational tool for everyone. And this is something that I've spent almost too much of my life over the last year-ish developing, but in a good way. Like I've had a ton of fun with it. And I've been able to challenge a lot of our previous ways of thinking along the way. So I am really excited to share some of that. And yeah, continue to hopefully build some freaky athletes or help them get freakier. That's really all I get excited about. So.
And Matt, don't forget that we had an awesome conversation with Diwesh and some other Major League Baseball / baseball people last year on our 1080 Motion website. So you can drop in and hear the coach's corner and listen to their roundtable. So another place to get a little more of him.
Heck yeah. So that is also on our YouTube, just as this will be. But no, again, it's been super nice getting to know you and your staff. And you're a super good speaker, I must say. I enjoy kind of hearing your brain kind of work. So I look forward to continuing to work together. Thank you very much again, Adam and Diwesh. And looking forward to the next one.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.